Welcome, everybody. It's Dr. Doug Pernikoff and my wonderful co-host, Miss Cindy Vickers. And we're here today at Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. We're going to talk a little bit about an animal called a sugar glider. And we'll explain what they are and where they're from and all that. But some people know them. Many people have never seen one. We're actually going to have a picture taken at the end of the show that we'll put up on our site and our YouTube.
What site might that be, Dr. Doug?
Well, Cindy, that's a great question. I think if people want to see a picture of a sugar glider, then they can either Google it or they can go to my site, on my Facebook site at Dr. Doug's Animal Radio Show and join. And also we'll have some video.
Yeah. And I know I've got to jump in already. You know,
go ahead.
This has happened to me, okay? I'm telling a true story where people have actually said to me, in reference to listening to the show and to you, that, wow, Doug Pernikoff seems really smart.
So we fooled him.
And I'd just like to say we had to re-record this whole thing because he does not know what the Facebook page is or what Dr. Doug's
I'm
radio.
a techno-boob.
I'm telling you, it's kind of important that you give him that information.
Well, my kids laugh at me if I try and buy a computer or some kind of electronic equipment. They just go, why?
Yeah, they're
or you don't need that. You'll never use those features.
Right, Facebook is not broken. It is you.
Oh, yeah. What is Facebook? No, never mind.
All right, so moving on.
Okay, so first of all, the logical question for our audience is going to be, what the heck are sugar gliders? So, I forgot to introduce our special guest.
Oh, we're going to have a heck of a time today.
Oh, my God, what a terrible show host. What was your name?
Don't do that to her. It's Rose.
You know my
That's
name.
right.
It's
okay.
Rose.
I had a little brain stall there. Our special guest is Rose Bradley, who's a personal friend of mine and has been keeping sugar gliders for quite a while. And actually, I've imposed on her the last couple of maybe 6 months, 8 months, and now she has many more sugar gliders than she started with because I keep bringing rescue sugar gliders to her, and she keeps taking them. So she's very vulnerable. And I'll give you her address later in the day. So if you have a sugar glider or some other animal you want to dump on her front yard, she'll probably take it.
Well, okay, Here's a trick question. I know the answer. How many sugar gliders does Rose have? Don't you answer, Rose, because you know.
You're asking me?
I'm asking you.
Let's ask the audience.
No.
I'm going to guess that right now she has about 12.
Oh, whoa, so close.
Close.
How many?
13.
There you go. Now, Rose really isn't 18 years old. She's a woman. So why don't you introduce yourself and say hi.
Hi.
Oh, God.
Okay, so the question was, what is a sugar glider? And let me
Yes.
help you. Okay, Rose, what is a sugar glider?
They're marsupials. Some people call them flying squirrels. They're not. They call them rodents. They're not. They're actually
Go ahead.
marsupials.
Okay.
And they're tiny. They're in fact, we've just been saying that when they're born, they're 0.2 of a gram.
And it's a full pound is 454 grams equals 1 pound.
So, how big are they, in inches?
Well, they're probably, when they're first born, and this is true of all marsupials, and marsupials are, what animals do we know?
Kangaroo.
What else? Wallabies, things like that. And then also, in the United States, we have a marsupial.
Wait, I know that I know this. Can you give me a hint?
Well, it's possibly an opossum.
Oh.
And they have all the same features. They have a pouch. The females have a pouch. They will also have, the females actually have a double female part, and the males have a double male part, and they breed into each site. So it's kind of interesting.
How long did you work on trying to say that?
I just made it up. I already had strict instructions from Cindy not to use any.
Yes.
We can't use the V word or the P word.
Right. Okay.
So anyway, so they're very, very interesting, and they also, this particular animal is in the wild, comes from the areas around southern Indonesia, Australia, and those islands around there. And they're imagined exclusively in the trees, in this case. And you're right, as you were saying, they are often mistaken as flying squirrels because they kind of have the same ecological niche. And they can go apparently up to 150 meters. They can open up their webbing and coast with a little bit of wind. At 150 meters, that's a lot. That's like 50 feet.
Well, maybe if you're a sugar glider person, you would find this to be offensive. But if you're not a sugar glider person, you're trying to describe them. They sort of look like a cross between like a little mouse and a chipmunk. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a little chipmunk, except that it almost can have like bat wings, but
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
chipmunk bat wings. So,
You love to say chipmunk.
well, I
You're very good at
and
it,
I'm
too.
possibly really not the sugar glider expert. But
Well, they actually have a webbing that attaches from their lower foot up to their upper foot, and they can actually open up and spread that out so they look like Batman. And the other point about living, it's always interesting for me to study form and function in animals. Why are they built? Why do they can do the certain physiology or biochemistry to live in a particular ecological niche? So again, we said they're arboreal, so they're able to get around and look for food to forage. They, of course, have the gliding opportunity. But they also have specialized teeth. They live in the acacia forest.
eucalyptus trees.
Yeah, the eucalyptus trees, which we all think about when we think about, what's the other
The
one?
koala bear.
Yes.
Is that a
excellent.
marsupial?
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not a marsupial.
Okay, but they're friends.
Yeah, they're in the same region. I hope I
They
didn't make a
coexist.
mistake there, but no, I'm
Peacefully.
pretty sure. And anyway, they have specialized little pointed, like needle teeth, and they actually bite into the bark of these trees that emit a kind of a gel sap, or a gum they call it, and they'll eat that. It's highly nutritious for them. They have a very high vitamin E requirement that they get through these feedings, and they also eat opportunistically. They'll eat insects. They'll even eat a little bit of dead mammalian flesh. If they scavenge, they can find that. So in captivity, we get to feed them a lot of different things. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you do feed your animals?
That's a big topic for a lot of different people. So I can say what I feed mine, because everybody's totally different. If you got new gliders, you definitely want to do your own research and decide for yourself what you want to feed your gliders.
And talk to the community online.
Right. The online communities, Facebook, talk to your vet, call Dr. Doug. Collect
so sweet.
information before you buy one for sure, or purchase one.
Wait, before you go any further, what is a typical cost if you buy a sugar glider? I've never seen a sugar glider
good
for
point.
sale. I don't know where you would buy one. What would you pay for one?
What they run anywhere from $150 to $2,500.
So what's
They're like
become
poodles.
I know. Well, here's
Right.
the thing. It's a pet trade item in the United States, and we do this to all animals. We did it to ostrich. We do it to alpacas. We are interested in them for their color, and that's the biggest thing, right? So we do specialized breeding to get either natural colors, or through breeding and inbreeding lines and stuff, we can create new colors. So recently I was doing some sugar glider work. I was invited down to Florida to help with a big breeder, and she had a pure black sugar glider baby, which was just absolutely stunning, probably because there were no others, right? And of course that one, I think she said, was worth $4,500 or $5,000.
Easily, yes.
Right.
Oh,
Now,
mackerel.
the traditional color is kind of a grayish, and then there's different pattern differences, I guess, along their fur coat. But why don't you share some of that, because you know it better
And
than
we
I
didn't
do.
get to what they eat either. So wait, let's
okay.
go back to that. So what do you feed
What
them?
I feed mine is a sugar glider gravy. It's an instant HPW gravy. You mix it with bottled water and freeze it and serve it to them like a tablespoon per glider.
So do you buy it in unconstituted
I
form?
buy it in a powder form.
Okay.
And then mix it.
Whoa. What is HPW? You mix. You
High
get
protein.
It's a high protein.
What's W stand for?
Good question.
WOA.
That's
It's a high protein WOA, and it's a very good product. So
well. There are
And we recommend it here on the Dr. Doug All Things Animal Show.
and I feed them also fresh vegetables and fruit
okay, so how much?
and a kibble.
I know they eat fruit, but how much vegetable matter? I never really thought they ate much vegetable matter. Is
They
it-
do.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually give them an average of 1 tablespoon of each for vegetable, a tablespoon for fruit, and then a tablespoon of the gravy.
Is that how much they eat per day?
per day. Yeah.
3 tablespoons.
And do you just
per
let
glider.
them graze feed on their own, or do you feed them at specific times?
I generally feed them in the evening in a dish in their individual cages. Some of them, like if they don't have teeth, they get a little extra gravy. So I put it in and make sure like certain gliders eat. I kind of keep track of who's eaten and who hasn't. And if I can see that somebody's getting left out, then I'll hand feed.
Okay, but did you just say that you put them in their individual cages, so then then, is it just one sugar glider in a cage when you feed them?
No. No,
Okay.
I've got 4 cages in my office, in my glider room. I've got 5 in one. Then I get the 2 babies in one. The 2 newer ones are in a small cage by themselves.
But I mean, in the
I have
wild,
4.
do they colonialize? Do they have a grouping kind
Yeah.
of thing?
Yeah,
So they can
colonize.
be big colonies within a range, or like right there with each other, and like are they all burrowing in the same hole in the tree, or is it going to be they space themselves out, but they're kind of a family unit?
They're kind of a family unit, yeah. And it's like any other family unit. Some days I open the cage and everybody's tucked into one pouch, and some mornings and they're kind of split up. So they've been fussing through the night, so they kind of went to their own direction.
So I've noticed that when handling them as a veterinarian, a couple of interesting things. They have the real big bulgy eyes that almost see. They sit flat on the face, but they can have a pretty good vision panorama, which would be important to protect them from predators because they are the low end of the food chain. So birds, owls, snakes, things like that would be animals that would predate on them. But the eyes also help them. They've got, similar like cats, they've got eye components that allow them to see at night because they're mostly nocturnal, which means living in the evening. But there's another neat word I love. It's called crepuscular. And that means animals that are starting to move around in low light, and then before it's nocturnal.
I'm writing that down.
Crepuscular.
That is such a good word.
I love that word.
Spell it.
So, crepuscular.
Oh, crepuscular, that's our vocabulary word for today. And that means they begin to move in the low
When
light.
you're talking to your grandchild, you could say crepuscular.
I do.
And then the little kid will learn that, and he'll be walking into preschool with that term.
Well,
But anyway, back to our sugar gliders. So the other thing that they have that's physically interesting, they have these little claws for climbing as well. So you have to keep those trimmed. But on the back feet, the 2 inner claws are grooming claws. And you can't or you shouldn't cut those because they use those for their grooming. And the other interesting thing about sugar gliders is they have glands all over their body. So they have little anal glands right by the tush, male and female. But the males have a lot of other scent glands around their body, on their chest and on their abdomen, I think other places too, on their head. And the purpose of those, I believe, is probably to constantly mark their tree territory for females, but probably also for food resources.
okay, so that was a whole bunch of information, but before you...
Should I talk slower?
Before you got here, Rose is out in the hallway, of the studio, and it's caused a crowd to gather because she's got the sugar gliders out and they're on her head and they're climbing down her shirt and they're like all in love with her and everybody wants to hold them. And she told us that the sugar glider could just climb straight up a wall. I mean, a completely flat, dry wall.
Not a flat wall like this
Oh,
here.
you can't?
They
I
have to
couldn't
have
hear
some- Sorry, they can't climb up a straight flat wall. They have to have something they can grip to.
Or a little texture on it. Yeah.
Well, there
Oh.
goes my story.
What was your story?
That I thought that was amazing. Like they were Spider-Man. I thought they could just climb up the. That's
I think
anyway.
in many cases they can because, again, they have these little pointed, very sharp little nails. And I don't think it would take much. Like this drywall and stuff.
Yeah, if it were soft enough.
It's soft enough. I think they probably could climb.
They could grab.
Oh, okay. So they can grab things.
Well,
and-
they can grab if one was jumped out of my pocket, it could go up and over and across. It would jump to around the window frame, and climb the window frame and sit up. It has to have something they can kind of
it can grab too.
Their hands are very small, so
Yeah.
they can grab
And
bookcases and things like that. They can climb.
And I see them curl their tail, but they're not a true prehensile animal. That's one where a tail actually acts like a hand. And then finally, they have big ears, so they can expand those ears up, and they also face up like radar. Their ears go like this. And we're going to return from our quick break, and then we're going to talk a little bit about their vocalizations, because those are very unique and distinct as well.
Yes.
And I'm writing down prehensile because I just think this is a fabulous
Crepuscular,
vocabulary day.
prehensile.
Yes, prehensile.
Angina.
What? No.
That's chest pain.
It,
You looked at me. Okay, everybody, it's Dr. Doug Pernikoff of Dr. Doug's Animal Radio Show, Cindy Vickers, my co-host, and our wonderful guest, Rose Bradley, and we'll be back in just a moment. Here we are again with Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. Cindy and I are asking questions to our guest, Rose Bradley, who has a very unusual interest and hobby. She raises and manages and rescues sugar gliders. And I don't know, how does that impact your relationship with your husband and your family?
My husband's not happy about it, but he doesn't get to choose.
Does he walk in the sugar glider room and help you at all?
No.
No, not at all?
Well, if I'm out of town, he will feed them. He'll take out the old food and put in the new food.
Or at least he says he does.
He will.
Okay. Otherwise he's punished?
that was a threatening look.
He will.
She's always threatening men.
But he'll do it when they're sleeping.
Well, okay, so this is usually a question that Doug asks, and I'm always like, oh, such a boring question, but I really do want to know.
Thanks.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
You're so subtle.
But what?
No.
Why did you get a sugar glider to begin with? I mean, how did that even happen?
Husband quit talking to her.
No. My daughter and I were out shopping at the mall, and this was when Pocket Pets were selling them in the malls. Not so much anymore, and I wouldn't recommend people buying their gliders from them in particular. Just if you're going to buy one, do your research, find a good breeder. But how we ended up finding them is we found them at the mall. We bought one.
I didn't realize.
I mean, did you just go, that's so cute, I want one, and that's how it started?
We actually went home and did a little research first, and then came back and purchased a glider. And then the next day I went back and purchased a second glider so that they would have a cage mate.
Would you say the
That's
average
how we got
price is
started.
like a couple $100 typically for a basic with few
Starter
options and
package?
features? Yeah.
Well, that would be if you didn't buy if you buy a generic from a starter cage, starter food, and the glider's probably close to $500-600
Wow.
for a whole package.
Cindy, let's start a company. We don't have to do anything. Let them breed, Okay, so I want to say something about marsupials that's very interesting. I didn't get to finish, but so the interesting thing about marsupials is that they are constantly breeding and have 2 to 3 cycles, usually 3 cycles of baby being developed. So, for instance, let's take a kangaroo.
I mean, per year?
No, at the same time. They're very prolific. Okay.
So, wait a minute. Are you saying that they could have babies at different stages of development?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so for instance, in the kangaroo, and I'm sure it's the same with the marsupial, but the kangaroo can have a joey, which is the mature baby that's about ready to leave the pouch, that's in and out of the pouch, at the same time that it has a small, very small developing baby on the nipple inside the pouch. Okay, and then they can have another baby that's coming down the female tract, and then what they do is they climb up a mucous membrane from the opening of the female body up into the pouch, and they latch on when it's their time. So you can see how prolific they can be because they're basically cycling 3 animals out. Well, I guess you'd say 2 are born and 1 is in the uterus or somewhere along the tract.
Okay, so you get a sugar glider. Okay, so we kind of know what they eat and how you got one. And that sort of just grew into, you got more interested in people. Doug is telling you every time there's one to be rescued. But if I were somebody who does not have a sugar glider, but I'm kind of interested in finding out, I mean, how would you describe them as a pet? I mean, can you cuddle with a sugar glider? Do they seem affectionate to you? Do they just seem like an animal that you want to observe because they're fascinating? What's the...
Cindy's looking for a man.
I would say all of it. It just
exchange.
That can
depends.
cuddle and observe? Is that what you're saying? Okay, yeah.
It depends on the
Okay.
glider. They all have different personalities. So I might bring home a glider that's very friendly. Like my first one, he likes to hang out, sit down my shirt, sit on my shoulder.
don't
He
blame
likes
him.
to be with me all the time. I've got gliders that come out and eat out of my hand and hang out and say, see ya, and go back in the pouch and do their own thing. So that's not a single answer for that. Depends on the glider.
Sounds like husbands.
Can you...
How you classify
so
husbands.
how do you...
Right.
But do they like it for... Let's suppose it's the one who wants to be all around you. Do they like it if you pet them? Can you kind of cuddle them?
Yes.
And what do they do all day? Like, how do you entertain a sugar glider? I mean, you
Well,
probably
again, they're nocturnal or crepuscular. So in a natural state, wild state, they're going to be just avoiding the heat and just hanging out in their burrow or in the tree or whatever. But in captivity, that's a good question.
Toys.
Toys?
Toys.
Oh, okay.
Toddler toys. I switch out toddler toys.
And they actually grab at the toys and play with them
Yes.
and hang on them and stuff?
They really like the little farm buildings and the Batman castles and
Really?
stuff. I swap them out because they
Okay.
get bored with what's in there. So you have to actually rotate.
Rose, what time do we have to get you back to the home? I was just wondering.
You know,
We actually do have to rotate toys and move pouches around to keep them entertained.
Yeah.
all right, so here I think is the obvious question that everybody who's listening probably has. Do they fly?
No,
They glide.
glide.
I do know that, but I'm asking.
Oh, well,
For
what's
the
their
benefit
name?
of our listeners.
What's their name again?
Gliders, but that doesn't mean they don't fly, because they do glide.
No, it's different. So gliding is they just...
Again, there hopefully
on
are
windstream.
many people listening who really want to know the answer to that question.
It's a good question.
No, that was a sarcastic response that I got.
I talk to my kids that way, too. It was a really good question.
What are they
so-
called? Yeah, so they don't fly ever. They don't they have the big wingspan, essentially.
Yeah.
But they don't flap those wings and fly.
They don't call them wings either.
Okay, fine,
I think they
okay.
call them potagiums.
Do they really?
I think so.
Potagiums.
Yeah. They're, I'm trying to see if there's
Let's
a word.
consult our
Yes,
notes.
yeah, it's the membrane. It's a potagium. Oh, my God.
Potagium.
Anyway, you've got to have potagium with tea and biscuits.
Wow. Okay.
So cool. God, I can't remember. I remembered that.
Dogs don't have any of these words.
I know. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of the caging, the kind of caging I've seen at your house and other places, it's pretty interesting. Besides all the toys and goodies, we wanted to talk a little bit about these special wheels, the fly wheels. So we know from rodent pets like guinea pigs and stuff and hamsters, we have these wheels that they exercise in.
We call it the flywheel.
Flywheel.
Just like to say.
That's right. And they can take in there, and as long as they don't get their potassium caught in the rung, they can be very
During their crepuscular
studies.
endeavors.
Yeah, but you were telling me all about the special wheels that are formed in the industry to satisfy these guys. Why are they different? Number one.
Why are they different? Well, they're a little bit wider. There are lots of different types of wheels. Some are safer than others, but mostly the glider wheels have no bar in the middle. They're open, because if you would go online and watch one run in a wheel, you see how they hop through. So that's
So
a
they're
big,
kind of enclosed, is what you're saying. They don't have the rungs that are open because they get their foot caught, or
well, you have a picture of one over there somewhere. It's just like a wheel, but it's got the wheel itself is not solid. It's like a mesh wheel, but the front
Oh,
of
I
it's
see it,
open,
yeah.
and there's no bar or anything through the middle.
yeah, the audience can't see them, but they're interesting. Now, do they have those at the pet shops, or do you have to buy those online?
Generally have to find them online. There's no place local that I know that actually sells them where you can actually go in and just purchase one ready to go.
So even-
Pretty much
Cruisers.
have to get them
I'm sorry?
online.
So
I'm
the
sorry, they're cruisers. They're custom choice cruisers. So
cruisers, because they
Yeah.
move fast.
I don't know that. I'm looking at the paper.
So will they go in there as individuals or as pairs, or it doesn't matter? You see it both ways, or
Both.
Seriously,
Right.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So what if you're standing, the other one's running? Aren't you going to trip and fall on your face if you're a sugar glider? Well, I mean, if one's standing still and the other one's moving, something's got to happen.
Oh, well, I have seen them try to go both, each of them try to run the opposite direction.
Let's go back to having this business because these wheels, they're like $40 to $72 for
Let's
shipping.
get somebody
Yes,
to
they
make
are.
some here.
And you
just,
there are different companies that make them. There's not one single company that makes them.
Okay, so you won't hear us on the radio next week because we're going to start a new business.
We are.
So what is the breeding length, gestation we'll call it? I know that it's different because they go through these different stages, but generally when you breed and then you expect to see a baby pop out of the pouch at what time, at what age?
That's going to be an answer for you.
Okay, I would tell you it's about 16 days to get them up into the pouch, and then it sounds like things I've heard or read that they'll last in the pouch, in and out of the pouch by 70 to 74 days. And then do they in the wild stay as a family group, or will the babies branch out to their own relationships?
Well, they don't wean until they're about 120 days.
Oh my God, you're so
I'm
intelligent.
reading the same paper you are.
Oh, okay, good. Shh, I'm not reading anything. I'm the host. I know all this stuff.
I don't know that answer as a fact, but I would assume that they would stay in a colony.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's very interesting too. So, are they suffering from predation and human, intervention? Are they becoming more extinct, or are they just so prevalent it's not an issue right now?
I don't think it's an issue right now.
Okay.
They
And-
stay with the colony until they're approximately 7 to 10 months old.
Oh my gosh.
And
What
other
else do you
things.
know?
I don't want to say the other things I know. You sort of alluded to them, and I feel like we should just pass over their
Passover?
their
I think it's early for
their
that.
body parts. They have a musky odor. Okay, so is it like a ferret?
Well, it's different. It's almost
not
sweet.
strong.
It's kind of sweet
Yeah.
smelling. Oh, I wanted to ask you about these vocalizations. Like all animals have unique vocalizations, but these guys have some pretty distinct ones. Can you describe 2 or 3 of what their purpose is?
Well,
or
they
when you
kind of
hear
have
them?
like a singing sound, which I can't do. They'll bark, they click.
They bark.
They'll bark. That's the most prevalent. They do bark. They crab, which is really,
When they're complaining.
yes.
So yeah, the people wouldn't know what that means, but I've heard it when I'm messing with it. I mean, they just go nuts.
Really?
If
Like
they're upset-
squirrels. That sounds like a squirrel.
If they're
Kinda.
upset
It's more
or
like my
scared,
wife, I think. But anyway,
defending themselves, they'll crab.
do things like that. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back to visit with Rose, and we'll talk about some other topics as well. And Cindy and myself, Dr. Doug, here at Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you.
Sugar, sugar, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you.
Pretty soon all my troubles will pass, 'cause I'm in shoo shoo shoo, shoo shoo shoo, shoo 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 shoo, Sugar Town.
Welcome back to our third segment here at Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. We've been visiting with our special guest, Rose Bradley. She's told us some very interesting information about sugar gliders, a marsupial from southeast Australia and Indonesia and all those little islands around there. Very, very interesting animal. They kind of replace what we have in flying squirrels throughout North America, Central America, and elsewhere. In that particular niche. But because Australia and that whole area, subcontinents, have been separated from the rest of the big land masses for so long, they have these ecological niches, or niches we call them, and different animals design themselves over time and evolve to fit into a specific region. Really an interesting animal, very popular in the pet trade. There are, I don't know how many different color variations. How many are there recognized now in the pet trade?
Well, there's several colors. Mostly they're the gray ones are all white and a combination in between. Some other colors that are coming out are like the brown gliders, but they're definitely not a pet for the average family, not for children. They're long-term commitment. They can live up to 14 years, so it's not a pet that you want to get and decide after a few years you don't want it anymore. That's how we end up with so many having to be rehomed, because people don't take that into account.
No different with pets, dogs and cats. I mean, that's
Right,
why
like
there's
with dogs and cats.
6 to 7 million animals that are euthanized.
And it's really
every
hard on
year.
them to be rehomed, because then they become distrustful. It takes them a while to trust a new family because they don't know the environment. Are you going to leave me too? type of thing. They're definitely not for small children.
So I know they like to be on you and around you, but do they actually enjoy being petted, or they just want to be close to you?
It really depends on the glider. They all have different personalities.
I'm senile.
No, but that's a good thing to point out and bring back up again, because they are not the same.
Right, no two
They're
animals
all
are the same.
individual, right.
So I think your message here is to be really careful, do your due diligence, talk to people. And again, we always talk about with the digital world, there's so many communities online, blogs and things where you can really learn before you invest time and money into this kind of science.
Right, do your research.
Okay, good.
But
So,
if once you become a glider lover, you're hooked for life.
Really?
Either you like them or you don't. There's people,
sauté medium rare?
pretty much.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're going to switch subjects. And the only reason is, as a veterinarian, I always get concerned about things that are going on in the pet world. And one of the things we've been seeing lately, more frequently, and maybe it's because people are traveling, it's the showtime for a lot of dog breeds and stuff, but we're seeing some episodes of both canine influenza or the canine flu, and also we see something called kennel cough, which is a tracheobronchitis, or irritation, inflammation, infection of the trachea, the air tube, and the very upper portion of the lung masses, the airways. So why do I bring it up? Well, canine influenza can be very deadly, can spread very fast, and it's broadening its margins. It was first brought to the U.S. and other places from Asia, where apparently in Korea, South Korea, they had animals that were bred for the meat market, which sounds kind of gross, but that's what happens around the world. And a lot of those animals were rescued by good-natured Westerners, but they brought these animals in that they believe were carrying this flu virus. Now, where did it come from? Well, we always say that viruses are really unique and specific to a given species, but the flu is one thing that we know even in our own species, the human species, we have to make a new vaccine every year because that virus is able to transform itself all the time. So it's possible that this flu virus that's in our dogs now may have come from close relationships and stress of humans emitting it to the animals grabbing it, or vice versa. So the flu in the human is very much like the flu in the dog. They have nasal ocular discharge. They can be febrile, very lethargic or weak. The point is that because our dogs and the human and the U.S. population, probably in Europe as well, are so naive immunologically, their immune systems haven't seen this virus.
Is this airborne?
Yeah, it's airborne, so like a sneeze or mucous membrane discharges, things like that. So it's, like I said, it's highly contagious. So the CDC, as the Center for Disease Control, would say that it has a high morbidity. Another new word.
I know that word.
Okay, good. Morbidity for the population listening is a term that means basically its frequency in a population, or the amount of animal or human that are afflicted. And then the mortality rate is how many die. And this has both a high mortality and a high morbidity. So very, very concerning. Now, recently...
I'm sorry for interrupting, but it's transmittable from dogs to humans?
No.
Okay.
There's no cases we know that, but maybe at one time there was an initial transfer.
Dog to dog.
Yeah.
Not dog to cat either.
Well, some of the literature actually says that possibly cats could be vulnerable, but I haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. And the first virus form that was isolated came from those Asian sources, were discovered out of populations in Chicago in 2015, I believe, was the first noted outbreak. And this was one particular strain of the virus. The virus has subsequently changed, and like flu viruses do. So now there's 2 vaccine products available, actually one that's representing the new virus strain and one that has both the old and the new virus. It's called bivalent. So you can ask your vet. I think most of what you're going to see today is the new strain available. But my point is that recently there was an outbreak in 2015, over 100 animals in Chicago. Then it spread to, I believe, South Carolina and some of the other Midwest states too. And recently, there was another outbreak. I think overall there were over 1,000 recorded cases from that first kind of episodic or epidemic. And now I've heard recently that in 2017, even in June, because of the activity in the show field that dogs are starting to be exposed. And I believe there was an outbreak west of St. Louis in Washington, Missouri, or some area that was related to a big show, a multi-group show.
So can I just throw in a little training advice that I think people do not want to neglect? I always include this with every puppy that I ever work with, and actually any dog that gets adopted at any time, but you want to start when they're a puppy. Other than housebreaking, one critically important thing to do with your dog is handle them frequently, many times a day, until your dog is so comfortable with being handled that they just don't flinch. And by handling, I mean lift up their lips, look at their teeth, touch their gums, open their mouth, close their mouth, push the flap of their ear back around their head, stick your finger in their ear a little bit, move it around, clean it out with a Q-tip, so that you can touch their ears and move them and look in their mouth and touch their tail. And
you must be fun on a date.
No, but seriously, because if your dog particularly needs to have, being groomed is one thing, but if they need vet care and they get even more highly stressed when the vet really isn't doing anything but looking at them. Then if you have to do something that's a bit more invasive, it's just so difficult for the vet and really for your dog.
Sure.
That it just makes the situation much, much harder to get them thoroughly looked at with incredible stress to the dog that does not need to happen.
Right, and then going to the shows, I guess some dogs really enjoy the show experience, but others would get stressed. And with stress comes an open door, because the immune system, when you get stressed, your cortisone levels in your body go up, cortisol. And cortisone, it has protective devices and purpose, but it also retards the immune system's ability to perform optimally. So you're in this stress situation, whether it's good stress or bad stress, you're excited, your system's working differently, then you're exposed to something new that your body and our populations of dogs haven't seen before. That's why they're so darn sensitive, and that's why you can have such a high mortality or death rate from those early exposures. So that's terribly important. You're going to see your groomers, you're going to see your kennels and boarding facilities, and you're going to see your show programs. Anything where there's a lot of exposure of dog to dog, you're going to find that people are going to be demanding that you demonstrate proof of vaccination. And your doctor can describe the vaccine protocol he wants to use, but generally you should expect to get 2 vaccines at least 3 weeks apart, and then I believe it's just an annual booster after that. So now I wanted to bring up, we've only got a few minutes left, but in contrast to the flu, I mentioned kennel cough. Now that's been around for a long, long time. Veterinarians vaccinate for kennel cough against one particular agent, which is a bacteria. But and it's the same thing that causes the croup in humans. It's a Bordetella, which they vaccinate our children for. Different bug, same cousins, first cousins. So in kennel cough, what happens is the organism, whether it's that organism, the bacteria, or some kind of virus or other bacteria that can cause the same thing, it takes the lining of the trachea, which has little hair-like structures we call cilia, new word.
It is not a new word.
Oh, okay, I forgot. You know animal stuff. So the cilia act as a filter. So when something tries to come down the air tube from the oral cavity, the mouth, it gets filtered back. But with these diseases that cause kennel cough or tracheobronchitis, it actually gets rid of those cilia, and they have to regrow. But in that meantime, that couple weeks, that tube is kind of slick, and things go down, stimulate a cough. So I know as a veterinarian that my best differentiator to start with, you can do virus testing for the influenza. It costs a lot of money, and people would rather put that money into the treatment. But if you think you have kennel cough, all you have to do is press on the trachea, or the veterinarian can do it, and typically almost a 99% accuracy, if you press consistently for a few seconds, you'll get a coughing, hacking response, and that tells you pretty much that you probably just have kennel cough. So again, talk to your veterinarian about managing these. Don't be surprised if people are explaining things that you need to do. You need to vaccinate. This is why. I want to particularly thank Rose now, and I'll thank you again. But we'll be back in just a moment. Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. Dr. Doug Pernikoff and Cindy Vickers.
Go away and let me spend my life in shoo shoo shoo, shoo shoo shoo, Sugar Town.
Here we are in our final recap segment, Dr. Doug's All Things Animal Radio Show. We had a wonderful show, and I want to thank again our special guest, Mrs. Rose Bradley, and her great discussion on sugar gliders. And again, I think her lesson to us was, don't just jump into a sugar glider as a pet. Do your homework, talk to people, get on these community blogs, understand what you're getting into, because it's a 14, maybe a 12 to 14 year commitment.
She has 3 of them right here, right in her little.
Oh, she does, really?
Pouch. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and so anyway, thanks so much. I learned a lot, and it was fun to be sharing that. And I know, Cindy, you didn't know much about that breed, right? That animal.
No, I didn't. Thanks for pointing that out.
And you learned a few new words today.
I did.
You want to share those with the audience real quickly?
Crepuscular,
Oh, man.
which
say it
means
again.
that you move around in low light. You begin to move around in low light, and prehensile, which I feel like I once knew that, but that's when you use your tails to grip things. And you actually told me you have almost like a palm at the very end of your tail if you're a true prehensile, like
Yeah,
the spider
yeah.
monkeys and the howler monkeys.
Wow.
I take good notes.
She's a good learner. Can you say crepuscular one more time? I think?
Potassium.
Oh, potassium.
That's
oh.
that webbing that the
Oh.
sugar gliders
Oh,
have.
my God. We did really well. I want everybody to know that they can reach Cindy at our clinic, 636-530-1808. She's an amazing trainer, an animal person.
Can also go to Facebook for Loosen the Leash, Loosen, Loosen the Leash. It's on Facebook. There's a Facebook page, you can find me at loosentheleash@yahoo.com if you want to send me an email.
Did you want to mention an event or two
I
that
do.
might be going on?
Here's because I think it's just hot and people want to be out, and then they feel like they've left their dog all day, and now it's Friday night or Thursday night or whatever night, and you want to do something and you want to bring your dog, but guess what? You cannot leave your dog in the car at all, period. Not even with the windows down. So here are some places you can take your dog and just go hang out and visit. They're in Defiance, Missouri on Highway 94. There's a place called the Trail Smokehouse. You can bring dogs on the patio.
What are they smoking there? It's a smokehouse.
I don't.
Okay.
Ham hocks. I don't know.
Go ahead.
June 18th in the Grove, which is just a cool place to go in general. Stray Rescue has a fundraiser, but I have been to this one. They think they have it every year, and it's like a whole local art fair, and there's music, and there's an art show, and some of the proceeds go to benefit Stray Rescue. That's on the 18th in the Grove. Four Muddy Paws on June 28th is having a happy hour, but it's also educational. They partner with the companies that provide their food, the independent food companies, and so you get to learn about like this more, I don't want to say innovative, but not just your standard way to feed your dogs. They have very high-end food at Four Muddy Paws. It's a great place. And anyway, so June 28th, 5 to 7, Stella and Chewy's is going to be there, and it's a happy hour. And then I think they continue to have them all year long. So just Google Four Muddy Paws or go there. They're in Lafayette Square, and they're in Belleville, and I absolutely love the store. And then at the Boathouse, I said this before, but you can go to the Boathouse the first Wednesday of every month, so that's coming up pretty soon. And there's two things. One says 4 to 7, one says 5 to 7, but for $5 you can bring your dog. There you have it.
Thank you very, very much. That was really good. I wanted to also mention to our listening audience that our wonderful engineer, Joseph, has actually helped me place our shows on Dr. Doug's Facebook, the special group, Dr. Doug's radio show, Animal Radio, so you can look and listen and get to hear our shows, and otherwise they're a little hard for me to figure out where to find them if you're not listening to them on Saturdays. And I wanted to say, what else do we have on there? We've got, actually we'll have photos like this time. I think we're going to have a photo somewhere on there showing our sugar gliders so you can see what they are. And if you're interested, go ahead and explore and Google and learn more about them. They're a very interesting animal. And I just want to thank everybody once again. And this is Dr. Doug Pernikoff from the Clarkson Wilson Veterinary Clinic, and Miss Cindy Vickers and Rose Bradley signing off for this week.
No matter how I try,